Fresh pasta is a wonderful treat. It has a great flavor and a great texture, and it is a special occasion dish for sure. And if you want to impress your dinner guests next time, make them fresh pasta. It's definitely the way to go. As you can see, I am prepping a nice Italian side salad to go with my finished pasta dish, but for right now, I'm going to set this aside and dive right into making the fresh pasta. Making fresh pasta might sound intimidating, but it's actually a very straightforward method. And this recipe that comes to us from Catherine Conrad in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, uses just some basic, simple ingredients, and I'm going to show you what those are. First, I'm going to start with my wet ingredients. I'm going to use 2 whole eggs. I'm going to add these to a bowl so I can whisk everything together at the end. You can see these beautiful brown eggs with the bright yellow yolks that I think are just so gorgeous. And this time, I'm just going to add the egg yolk and reserve the egg white for another use. Separate that out. Trying not to get any eggshells in my mix. All right, so that's 2 eggs and 1 egg yolk. I'm going to set aside that egg white, and to my egg yolks, I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of water. And then I'm going to add a tablespoon of olive oil. Add some nice richness and fat to the pasta mixture, and then I'm going to add about a 1/4 teaspoon of some salt. Now I just mix all that together. Okay, so that looks nicely incorporated. I'm going to set that mixture aside and move on to my flours. This recipe uses all-purpose flour along with semolina flour. You can see right here that the semolina flour has this golden yellow color and kind of a grainier texture. It's actually a great element to add to your pasta because it strengthens the pasta and gives it a great texture once it's cooked. So if you can't find the semolina flour in your local market, you can use just all-purpose flour, but it won't be quite the same. So I'm going to start with 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, and I'm just going to put it right on my surface. Don't be nervous. Next comes the 1/2 cup. Here's my 1/2 cup of semolina. I'm just going to use my fingers, mix that all together right on the surface. And if you really don't want to do this on your surface, you can use a large, shallow, wide-rimmed bowl. But like I said, this is part of the fun. How often do you make your food directly on the countertop? So I'm going to make sure I have a nice wide well in the middle of my flour because my eggs like to escape. I'm just going to pour my egg mixture right in the middle, carefully. That looks good. Now, you can use your fingers. I'm going to use a fork. I'm just going to slowly start to incorporate the flour into the egg mixture. And this will take a few minutes, just a little bit at a time. And you don't want to incorporate too much flour at once. You want to make sure that you really incorporate all the little pieces. You can see that there's chunks of flour in there. I really want to work that in before I start incorporating more flour. The end result will be a nice smooth pasta dough. So don't rush this step. If by chance your egg yolk mixture escapes your flour down here, don't panic. Again, I really like this bench scraper tool. It's very handy. You can just start collecting the escaped egg mixture and incorporate it into your flour. So don't panic if that happens. It has happened to me before too. As you can see, slow and steady does it. You can definitely tell that there's a textural difference. Most of the lumps of flour have been incorporated. I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing until all the flour is in the egg mixture. So just about all the flour has been incorporated. You can still see there's some dry bits here. I'm just continuing to use my bench scraper to get any stuck bits off the countertop. And now I'm just going to switch to my hands. I'm going to bring it all together. And it's going to be sticky, but don't worry about that. I don't want to over knead this dough. I'm not making bread. I'm just trying to make sure that everything is well incorporated. And again, anything that's stuck on the counter, you can scrape up with your bench scraper. Okay, my dough has come together. As you can see, it's still a little shaggy, but that's okay. I am going to now divide this into 6 portions. You can eyeball it if you want to be specific. You can use your kitchen scale. It's not really that important though. So now that these are all separated into portions, I'm going to cover them and let this dough rest. This is a very important step actually. Letting the dough rest allows the flours to hydrate, which will make it easier to roll out. I'm gonna allow the dough to rest for about 30 minutes. Now up to this point, you can make this pasta dough ahead of time, wrap it well, store it in the fridge, and then it's ready to use the next day. So I have my portions of dough here. I'm gonna keep the rest covered while I work on this one because I don't want it to dry out. A nicely floured surface. I'm just going to take my rolling pin and roll this into an approximate 8 by 10 inch rectangle. I like to keep the dough moving on the surface just so it doesn't stick. If you find that it is sticking, obviously more flour will help. And again, bench scraper. Can't tuck this tool up enough. And because these are handmade noodles, they're gonna be knife cut. They don't have to be perfect, so don't worry about if your rectangle is not square corners. It's not worth the worry. And as you can see, after I let that dough rest, it's very easy to work with. It's not giving me any stretch back, spring back action. This dough has a good attitude. And like I said, you can see that it's not a perfect rectangle, but that's okay. I can use the end of my rolling pin here, give it a little extra pressure in those areas if I want to elongate them, just like that. Okay, so this looks about good for me. Like I said, I'm not gonna worry about perfection. I'm going to grab my cutting board and I'm just gonna dust this with a little flour. I don't want it to stick to itself because I'm going to roll this up. And then, as I said, I'm gonna transfer it to my cutting board. And now I'm going to form the actual noodles. So I'm just gonna cut mine in about a 1/2 inch wide strips. You can use whatever width you like. 1/2 inch for some reason just seems easy to me. And then my next step is to unroll these. I have a tray here with a pile that I've already done. I'm gonna dust with some flour, no sticking allowed. And now I'm going to unroll my knife cut noodles. And you can see they form a nice wide noodle, rustic shape, but they're going to be delicious. And they're going to taste great with the sauce that I use. So I'm just going to unroll all of these. And then as I did with this first little nest here that I made, I'm going to dust them with some additional flour so that they don't stick when I add them to the pasta water. Generous dust of flour, toss to coat. And now I'm gonna work with the rest of my dough. As you can see, I have my water simmering in front of me, ready for my pasta. I'm gonna generously salt that water so that the pasta has some great flavor. And now all it's left to do is add my fresh pasta. You're gonna see how quickly this cooks. 1 to 3 minutes, depending on how al dente you like your pasta. And I'm just gonna make sure that the water stays moving. This will help keep the pasta from sticking. Almost all the way in there. And one of the indicators with fresh pasta that it is done is that it will kind of float to the surface. It's been about 3 minutes. I would say that this pasta is done. So I am just going to take it straight out of the water and into my bowl here. I'm not even gonna worry about draining it in the sink. And I'm gonna toss it with some delicious, creamy Alfredo sauce. And just right in with that sauce. Give it a nice toss. And then we were ready to eat. I have my pasta that I've worked so hard on here in my bowl with that delicious creamy Alfredo. I'm just going to top it with some Parmesan cheese, a little bit of fresh cracked pepper, and I'm going to top it with my favorite herb, which happens to be chives. You can top it with whatever you like or leave it plain and simple. Now of course I chose Alfredo sauce today, but this pasta can be used with whatever sauce that you like. I'm going to serve my pasta with some beautiful grilled chicken and my favorite Taste of Home cheesy garlic bread recipe, and of course that awesome Italian salad that I was working on earlier. And I would say this is a pretty darn good meal, if I do say so myself. A little bit of white wine, done. Now I will give you a word of caution. Once you make fresh pasta, you'll never look back and you'll be hooked.